when I think of the arts, I think of it having an emotional response to people, whether that's yourself as an artist or as a viewer. I think it can evoke memories and nostalgia and fears and happiness and joy and all of these different emotions. If it can do that, then it's powerful and it should be in your life. I'm Oliver Mayhall. I'm a portrait and fine art photographer. So I've been working as a full-time photographer for around 6 years now. So I'd say my journey has been quite an unconventional one. When I was studying history, I developed a passion for street photography. So this would see me roaming the streets of Nottingham, sort of waiting for stories that unfold in front of my lens. I found it quite exciting and therapeutic. It was just me with my camera, my music on. Even from that early time, like my work's very surreal and abstract, but I'd be looking for a different angle, something a bit different and telling a story in a slightly unusual way. So I'd be using shop windows and puddles to like reflect and using different layers and textures to give that extra depth to the image. You know, I didn't look at lots of books or go to exhibitions with surrealist art. I think it just happened naturally. And I think a lot of my work is about experimenting and being open to ideas sort of developing whilst I'm shooting and allowing that space for the idea to breathe. Not everyone always realises, but a lot of my work is actually self-portraits. And that's not because I want to be the subject, but it allows me the time to get things wrong. There's a couple of images where I literally can't even see the camera. So there's one called Paper Face, where I have a paper towel over my face and a hat and glasses, and it's me behind the image. And there's another one called TikTok, which is a clock on my face. And again, there's no Photoshop within my work. Everything is shot on camera, so that's an actual clock on my head, which is strapped using rope. But that time when I'm on my own, I love it. It's just me, the camera, the idea, and working it out and working it through. So one of the works I shot was for an album cover for an artist. And then when I turned up on the day, the manager of the artist took me to one side and said, he's a bit shy, doesn't really want to be the focal point of the image, which is a bit of a challenge when you're taking a portrait of someone. I have a Polaroid back for my medium format camera, and I had the idea of taking his portrait with the Polaroid, then having him holding it to his face and then photographing him again, so he becomes kind of a bit lost in the image. It's one of my favourite portraits actually, because it wasn't planned, and I was having to like think on my feet. I'd say another piece of work is called All Eyes on You. The idea was basically to photograph the subject's eyes and then have them printed to photographic paper and then reattached all over her body. I wanted to sort of have the eyes of the subject going back onto the viewer, so the power balance is slightly shifted. So whilst you're looking at her body and her eyes, she's sort of staring straight back into yours too. When I was growing up, there wasn't a huge emphasis on art. We wouldn't generally go to galleries regularly. And it wasn't until I discovered photography that I discovered my outlet for expressing myself, I'd say. Even at school, I enjoyed art, but I didn't excel at it, or I couldn't draw or paint, or didn't have the patience or interest at that time to pursue it. But I don't actually remember the first time I picked up a camera, so to speak. It kind of developed naturally, and that's when, after my degree, so I did a master's in documentary filmmaking at Goldsmiths, and it culminated in a film called Launderette, and I basically just filmed people within the same London laundrette and asked them various big life questions. And it became this mosaic of different people's stories, so it was based on the idea of sonder, which is the realization that each person is living a life as vivid and complex as your own, with their own dreams, worries, fears, routines, friends, and inherited craziness. After I did my master's, I saw a role come up as a full-time assistant photographer. And it was a moment of, you can make a career out of this, you can, this does exist. It just wasn't something I'd even really considered. So I'd say I'm quite an introspective person. I'm a bit of a deep thinker. I'm an observer, and I think my work kind of expresses that. I grew up in the Kent countryside, and I feel like that's had quite an influence on my work, particularly like my nature-based work. So when I'm walking outside in the countryside, it just allows my mind to breathe and think. And there's no one else there, it's just me and my thoughts. And I think having that space just allows you to process things a little bit differently. There's a piece called Beyond the Horizon, and it's a mirror essentially on an easel shot down on the south coast. You have the beautiful skyline. So my idea was just to have the mirror, the background, and obviously the mirror is reflecting what's behind me. And then it was on the day that I saw that I could line up the horizon with the horizon in the mirror. Just adding little tiny details. I'm very detail orientated and thinking about how you can make things slightly more interesting. I think when I'm creating my own work, I get lost in it, and it's me just fully focused on that one thing. There's no worries or anxieties when I'm creating, because you're just in it. Mental health is huge. I know people myself who have struggled with their mental health, and they use art as not a form of escapism, but as a way of sort of dealing with or kind of distracting from the external pressures of day-to-day life. It's something you can be totally absorbed in and get lost in, whether that be music or art or furniture making, whatever it is. I think there's almost always something for everyone. It just might be that they haven't found it yet. So I think it's being open to going to exhibitions and going to see music or whatever it is, and exploring and learning and finding that art or experience that connects with you. People get very absorbed within their own day-to-day life. I do myself. There's stresses, and it's important to remember that there are these things that you can do to, take yourself away from that. And the arts, for sure, are a way of doing that. I think for me, my work, I want it to stop people and make them think. And whatever that might be, I don't mind what they think. So I try not to push my own agenda onto it too much, because I find it more interesting allowing them to develop their own interpretations based on their own life experiences, emotions and feelings.